Okay. All right. Hello. My name is Emma Doe Hubert. I'm a senior public health student, and I'm here today with Dr. Becky Pearson, a public health professor at the Central Washington University. And today we're just going to be discussing some questions regarding community gardening and the importance of it, and just various factors that are important that people may be interested in learning about. So, starting off, also, Dr. Pearson, would you like to introduce yourself or anything
Oh,
about
sure.
your field or anything?
Yeah. Hi, Emma.
Hi.
Well, Emma knows me, but many people may not. I am a faculty member at CWU. I've been here for since 2008, and I am what I consider a really socially focused public health academic. So a lot of what I do and talk about and write about and teach about and think about and read about, I do a lot of reading, is about social determinants and structures and systems in public health and how they make it harder or easier for us all to be healthy.
All right, awesome. So this conversation is centered a little bit around the Thorpe Community Garden, which is where I did my internship this past quarter. It was an amazing experience, and bringing awareness to the garden and just the benefits that it may have in Kittitas County is something that I feel is important to me. So kind of starting off with the first question. So Dr. P, what theory helps explain community gardening and community agriculture as part of public or community health?
Yeah, that's a great question, Emma. And again, when I think of who I am in public health, I immediately think of the social. And so one of the models that I've been carrying around in my back pocket since my grad school days is the social ecology model. And we teach the social ecology model in many of our classes. And I'm going to go ahead and share screen because I have an image that I think just makes it really easy and clear to understand as to why we would think of community gardens, community ag as part of the social ecology of community health anywhere and in our community. So I'm going to hit share screen. Okay. And so, yeah, so hopefully everyone can see this. When I talk about the social ecology model in the classroom, I'm kind of like, well, it's all about me. I'm in the center. And so as you can see here in the hot pink oval, right, it's the individual, and right, it's our genes, our family history, what we know, what we believe, what we feel confident about, what our personality is like, how we engage with things, how we think. All of that is really individual. And kind of right next to us is our interpersonal relationships, right? Who we know, who we hang out with, our family members, and all of that, and how those people, how those really close relationships kind of influence us and influence what we do and what we think about health and our behavioral choices, right? And how we influence them. So the social ecology model, I always like to emphasize, it goes both ways. Everything impacts me, and I can impact everything else, right? And so when we look at this model, so there's me and us right in the center. And then as we go a little bit out from ourselves, right, then we get into that organizational level. And so for kids, right, that's school, right? Well, for me as a working professional in academia, that is also school. School is my organizational level, right? And so, but as kids, school, clubs, that kind of thing. As adults, it's our work life, any organizations that we're involved with, our churches, that kind of thing, right? So all those things where there's actually an entity, right, around us. And then out from there, there's the community. And so those are the opportunities, the settings, the resources, what kinds of rules and regulations, right, are present in our community, whether that's in a city, a small town, the county as a whole, right? And so you can see that as we talk about these layers, right, that community gardens sit somewhere in one of these layers, right? So for me and for Emma right now as a CW student, the campus has a community garden, and so that's part of our organization. And so community gardens, though, sit in communities. And whether or not a community has a community garden or has more than one community garden, right, and how it works, how easy it is to get involved with if it's a no barriers or low barriers entity that people can easily kind of find out about, get involved with. It's free or very low cost, right? All of those things would be part of the organizational level of how something works, and the community level, right? And so wherever you would seat community gardens, they are part of a social ecology for any person or any community, right? And when we come out here, right, social structures, policy, laws, systems, national perspectives, ideals, values, norms, right, political thinking, all of that, that outer layer is so far out from us, but it still has an impact on our health for sure. And it also kind of has an impact on whether or not we might have easy access to community gardens. Because here we are 15 years from the time I started at Central, and I actually started our CWU campus community garden a few years in. So we're coming up on our 10th anniversary this year, this spring, actually. We started the garden in 2013. And at that time, and even still, I think that community gardens are a little bit unique in this country. And that depending on where you live, you're going to have more or less easy access to a community garden. And that means to me that it is certainly situated in kind of the ideals and the values and the beliefs of a country, right? So if we were to go to another country, there's a community garden on every block, right? Maybe, depending on which country that is, right? Lots and lots of people live in countries where community gardens are part of daily life, and where kids grow up from a very young age being around a community garden, walking by a community garden, seeing a community garden sign. I didn't hear about community gardens until I was doing my grad work in public health. And I started being engaged in food and nutrition as a public health student. And that's when I learned about community gardens. And I thought, wow, where has this been all my life? Well, it's just been all my life nowhere, because it's not such an everyday occurrence in our country to have a community garden in your life. And I simply didn't grow up with one around me. Even though I grew up in a relatively bigger city, I didn't know about a community garden. Maybe there was one there, but again, my aspects of social ecology, my parents, my family, the people I hung out with, my school, did not have any connection to community gardening. So again, I was a grad student before I understood that there was this thing called a community garden, that existed somewhere. And then I got excited and I thought, well, I want to make that happen. And my first opportunity was as a faculty member 5 years into my career here to start making that happen on this campus. And that's only one community garden, though, that we have access to in Ellensburg and around Ellensburg. And so when Emma and I met for the first time to talk about an internship around community garden, we moved quickly toward talking about one of the local gardens, right? And so she did her internship work around the Thorpe Community Garden. But again, I guess I would challenge anyone listening to and watching this to think about the place of community gardens and community gardening, and another term, community agriculture, right? And more terms, community food security, even community food justice and community food sovereignty. So sovereignty is a huge word, right? And again, relatively new to me in the food kind of context. Sovereignty just means being able to do what you want to do, right? If you're a sovereign, you're the king or the queen. So if you're a sovereign in your life, you have the ability to do what you want to do. So food sovereignty means being able to make our own choices. So I would challenge, again, anyone listening to this, watching this, to think about food within a community as being part of the social ecology. So yeah, again, hopefully this model, and it's one we use all the time, and I always tell students, you'll see it in different pictures, different colors, different layouts, but this is a model we use all the time in thinking about communities and how they work, and in public health. So I'll just stop there, and let's see, Emma, I think I'll be able to go ahead and stop share here and get back to where we see you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was I really love how in depth and just the theory surrounding social ecology. I think it's such an important model, especially going through public health at Central. I feel like that's one theory that's really stuck with me. I think it makes a lot of sense and it's easy to relate it to different concepts in the field. I also think that community gardening has a lot to do with just like a collectivist type of thinking, because in order to make a community garden work, it takes the village, it takes everyone to pitch in and help and volunteer. And I think the emphasis of how much work it really takes is something that might be a little unnoticed sometimes, just because it takes so much work to get started. And obviously, as you said, you started the community garden or the Central Garden, and it's taken years, and it's still not everyone at Central knows about it, because sometimes people don't seek out those kind of opportunities. But I feel it's definitely such a very important part of the community, and especially Ellensburg, Kittitas County, which is a high agricultural area. And it's also an important thing to think about.
Yeah,
So great.
absolutely.
So my next question is why is this important? Why is community garden important, and what kinds of benefits can come from community gardens?
Wow. Well, when I think again of the social ecology model, I just think of all those things that affect our health. And again, from really the me, from my bones and blood, my genes, my mother's health, my dad's health, everybody's health around me, my family history, what I grew up knowing and thinking about, right? What I grew up having access to, right? So from right there to all the way out, and all of that affects me. And the thing about community gardens and community agriculture is that when they are present in our communities, they change people's relationship with food. They help people recognize that they can and should and do have access to more fresh produce than they think they do, or can or should have access to, right? And that also, if you can get little ones involved with picking produce and eating it, when that is truly a part of a healthy kind of food sovereignty for them, right? To where they can get to make their own choices. Well, they might grow to like beans and carrots and broccoli way earlier than they would if they didn't have that access, right? So it changes norms for sure. Community gardens, having access to it changes norms, even if in really small ways. What I've seen being out and about at our campus community garden is that, especially when it moved from one part of campus to another part of campus based on a construction project happening, when it made that move, it was so much more visible to more people, because people would just be walking by and they would see it. And one afternoon I was out there and a woman came by and said, kind of, what is this, first of all? And second of all, can I be here? And I said, so this is what this is. And absolutely, please be here. And that person became one of our strongest volunteers for a really long time. And did beautiful growing for herself and her family in a couple of plots in the garden, and did so much work for the garden because she had the time and energy and she loved it. And she talked with us about specific plants that many of us thought were weeds, and said, in my country, this is such a nutritious and nutritionally valued plant. Like, okay, if you're, dig them up, but don't dig these up, because I'm going to cut them and cook them. And I encourage you to too, right? And so that, so the norms changing is incredible. And that's something that is hard to, sometimes it's hard to quantify, because a lot of the times community gardens, their staff and volunteers and their participants not only don't have the time or funding to maybe do surveys, do ongoing work around assessment and evaluation that we talk a lot about in public health, because they're too busy doing it, making the thing happen, making it happen season to season, right? And so when you survey and ask people about how they think and make a practice of surveying them after a season and year to year and that kind of thing, then you can learn about how their attitudes and their norms and their confidence around food and their practices around food at home are changing. But if you don't get to do that kind of work because you're busy making it happen, well, then you just have to know either A, this is working, or B, this is not. And the thing is, when a community garden is in a community, has low barriers, has lots of people involved, who kind of should be involved, and that's anyone. That's anyone and everyone should be involved in a community garden if they want to be. And when they are low barriers, right, when they are accessible to everyone, even if they have mobility issues, say, right, or even if they have something else going on that usually presents a barrier to participating, right, they're for everyone. And when you're there, when you see people putting seeds in the ground, helping other people put seeds in the ground, watering, talking to people about food, you know, saying, hey, I have an extra cucumber, you want it, having a kid next to them who says, I don't want to eat that, and then touches it and eats it and says, oh, that's tasty, let me have another one, right? When you see that happening, you know the impacts of community gardens. But so it's amazing because they have benefits, and it is really challenging to document those benefits. So yeah, the benefits are there. They're about food, they're about empowerment, they're about skills, they're about being social together, they're about being having access to things that we all should have access to, no matter how we use those spaces, right? The idea of third spaces, we should have community spaces and be able to be there. And community gardens do all of that. And yet, because the evidence base is tough to build, you almost have to be in that community to see and experience those benefits, which makes it really a cool thing that over time, well, gosh, if and when this spreads, if this garden can teach this garden and help this garden to get off the ground more and grab connections between people and make this work even more strongly in a community, and then the next community has one, and right, or the next community organization that could host a community garden decides to have one, right? When that stuff happens, then you're building the evidence. Again, tough to show it, and yet you're building the values and the benefits that happen within that community and making them stronger and pushing them out, right? And that's what public health really is all about doing.
For sure. Yeah, you're so right. It's definitely a lot of anecdotal evidence. You know, you have to be there, you have to experience it. There's not necessarily a set definition for community gardening and the outcome. So I think that each community has to kind of define it themselves. And in terms of benefits, yeah. So a systematic review that was published in the BMC Public Health was showing that community gardens are tied to higher fruit and vegetable intake levels, which is super important. Kind of how you talk about incorporating into those norms for starting with children, of course. So making them, you know, open and more prone to liking veggies at a younger age, which is a really great thing. You know, some kids have an aversion to broccoli until adulthood. It might even continue. But other impacts, you know, having that community get together, psychosocial impacts, you know, bringing people together, having a common goal, growing can be very positive for mental health, physical health, getting outside, but absolutely limitations for evidence from gardens is just, you know, it takes a lot of work. It takes a village, and it's very hard to standardize these kinds of definitions. So yeah, I love that discussion. So my last question for you, I know we kind of just mentioned it's very hard to define, but for our community, what would be a working definition of community agriculture and gardening in public health when thinking about Kittitas County or Ellensburg specifically?
Yeah. Wow. Well, I think, as you know, so there's so much agriculture. We're an ag focused community in so many ways. And I think that sometimes it goes both ways. I think that sometimes we over recognize ag as being community based, and sometimes we under recognize it as being community based, you know. So when I think about how I would define community agriculture and community gardening here, I guess it's probably two-pronged. And it is about, so So what aspect of the community does this focus on or touch, right? And to be community agriculture or community gardening, it has to be that there are more than, say, the landowner or the homeowner involved, right? Or at least that the possibility is there, right? So say I have a bookshelf in my living room. Well, that's not a public library unless and until I welcome people into my house, into my living room, and take books, please, and bring them back, and I'll let you have them for 2 weeks, right? So kind of similarly with community ag and community gardening, I think the part of the challenge with defining is that there are so many possibilities for defining and naming something as community ag or community gardening based. And even over the years, I've been learning about things such as yard sharing and things like that, where, I mean, that gets me closer to that thing about, well, I have a bookshelf in my living room, but it's not a public library unless I invite you in. Well, suddenly, if I'm yard sharing with you, though, if I say, well, here's my front yard, and first of all, I want to grow food in it, but I don't really have time or know how, but I'm going to let you come by every Wednesday afternoon and plant and water and that kind of thing, and take it all home if you want and leave me a cucumber sometimes if you will, right? That kind of thing. Those are community gardening and agriculture and food kind of strategies that are happening in places, around the country, around the world. We don't do a lot of that yet. And yet, so that shows you there's this spectrum, I suppose, of what community ag and community gardening can look like. And I used to think, that, like with the campus community garden, I tell people, when we started, it was kind of like, the first season we threw seeds in the ground and kind of hope for the best, right? And there was a handful of us out there, and okay, well, like, just don't leave the water on too long, but somebody please water. And right, so there's everything from, we don't know what we're doing, we're just starting, to very, very structured opportunities for people where, okay, we have this many beds, they rent for this much a year, or sliding scale, and right, and we have staff members, and we have really strong volunteers who agree to be here every single week, these hours or whatever, and they act as docents kind of, and they take people around, right? So everything from throwing seeds in the ground together on a space that you kind of claim, with or without permission. We did it with permission. But right, to very embedded, well, in our county, we have funding, in our city, we have access to this site in perpetuity. And, we have a full-time staff member and et cetera, right? So all of those ways that community garden can happen. Similarly, I think community ag can be defined so many different ways and can be thought of in so many different ways, right? And community food and community food benefits. I'm a person who understands and knows and welcomes the idea that we do need charitable food systems in our country, because right now we don't have equitable wage and benefit type systems. So we have people who maybe they're working as hard or harder than you or I are, and yet they cannot feed their families well, right? And their families experience hunger, and food insecurity, and lack of food sovereignty, lack of being able to do what you want to do around around healthy food, right? And so when we have that kind of situation, we obviously still need and depend on charitable food systems. And I also know, right? So I started that long-winded sentence with, I know and welcome and understand, right? And I also know that for me, and for a lot of people who work in and think in and write in and read in and teach in community food, those charitable systems don't equate to community food in a way. They don't equate to community food security. They certainly don't equate to community food sovereignty. And the reason I bring, the community food up into the room, and I didn't think about this earlier when we were crafting some ways to think about this, but community food, community ag, community gardening, it all plays around together, right? And community food is probably an umbrella term that includes community ag and community gardening, so we talk about the range of things that can be community gardening. Well, the range of things that can be community ag, it's parallel and it intersects, right? Because sure, you are a community that focuses on ag. However, your big farms producing hay are not producing community food. They are not producing a community ag thing. And yet there are folks who might say, well, because we have growers connected in co-ops, right? That is part of community ag, and that's how we see ourselves as being community ag. And who am I to question that, right? So, but community ag, right? So community food, community gardening, moving to community ag to me means that you produce on a grander scale than community gardens, say, and that in some ways the community doesn't have to be as physically present and involved to get their share, to get their benefit of the ag as they do in community gardens, right? So in community gardens, right, part of the whole strategy and thinking is that, like, is this going to work? It's going to work because you're there and because you are growing with us. And right. And if you're not going to, well, there can be the sharing aspect where, okay, so you choose not to engage to hold a plot, but you still want to have some food from here. It's great. We can totally work it out. There might be sharing days. There might be times in the season where we know we have so many zucchini that, the gardeners can't eat it anymore. And they put it out on a table at the edge of the garden and people know to come by and grab zucchini, right? Similar things I think can happen with community ag. And are more ready to happen, right? So community gardens, like you almost got to be there aside from those, right? But with community ag, I think you don't have to be there as much. Like community-based agriculture, community sustained agricultures, right? Or sustainable, right? CSAs, those kind of do not depend on the person engaging with them other than, say, to provide money. Right. I would like to own a share of this. I would like to get a box every month of the seasonal produce. I would like to know that I'm helping you keep your thing going. I would like to know that this stays part of my community, but I'm not going to come in. I'm not going to farm with you. I don't have those skills. I work 40 hours a week, whatever. But I want this to be around my community. I want to make use of it. I want to eat from it. And here's this other way I'll engage. And it's usually through money, right? Or through like land sharing, whether that's a teeny part of a yard or saying, hey, I'll let you have this land, right? And I think that that's part of what happens on Rogers, right? At the Thorpe Community Garden it is a piece of land that is just allowed to be used for this small community garden effort that in my mind, this, again, it's like this definitions thing is so complex and just webby because, right, is the Thorpe Community Garden simply a community garden or is it community agriculture? And it's like, I almost feel like it's a little bit of both, it's one small thing. Yeah, you feel the same way?
I would think so, because I'm thinking about Roger telling us about, the harvest and how he would just go around asking people, do you want cucumbers? Like, I know maybe necessarily you didn't like be part of the growing process, but we still want to share our bounty with you. And I think that's really great thing, because for the Thorpe Community Garden, no one necessarily has their own plot, but rather it's a bunch of different people coming together, working on the plot together, and then everyone in the community gets to reap that reward, which I think definitely shares a little bit of both, because people can volunteer and be part of the experience from March to the end of harvest season, or they can simply come and get the vegetables and fruits that have been produced. So I think, yeah, a little bit of both, and nothing is necessarily money motivated in the Thorpe Community Garden, I wouldn't say.
Yeah, absolutely at all, right? Yeah. Yeah, right. So yeah, well, so I know that again, it was kind of a webby kind of answer to that third question, but do you think does it kind of start to get there?
I think so. I think there's a pretty clear difference between community agriculture and community gardening. I think that makes a lot of sense, especially in terms of Ellensburg and the things that we offer. So my advice to anyone who's watching this video is, if community gardening is something that piques your interest, I would encourage you to check out the resources. So if you're a student, maybe look at the Wildcat Community Garden. If you're just a resident of Ellensburg or Thorpe or Kittitas County, check out the Thorpe Community Garden. Or I know there's one downtown that we talked about as well.
The downtown community garden.
The downtown
right?
community garden.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah, for Kittitas County residents, there are certainly an abundance of opportunities. So, and I hope that this was informational and got across some good points.
Yes, and absolutely. And before we close, Emma, I would just suggest to you that that anyone who wants to get involved with the Thorpe Community Garden, for sure, is there anything you can tell them about how to easily get involved with that, or is that still in play?
Sure. So I would navigate to thorpecommunitygarden.com. And there's a scheduling section of the website where you're able to talk to Roger, who's one of the organizers of the garden. And if you get in touch with him, I'm sure he'd be happy. I know they're looking for volunteers for this upcoming season. From my experience, it's been very eye-opening to see how much work is put into this garden and how important the results can be for the community. So if you want to garden, I would absolutely recommend navigating to thorpecommunitygarden.com, giving Roger a call. And yeah, I know their list of produce probably is over 30 different types of fruits and vegetables.
Wow.
And they're definitely looking for help. So
excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Emma, for the time and the conversation. I think this is neat. Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much, Dr. P. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. I appreciate it too. And I will go ahead and hit stop recording. Okay.